It's really important to have your courses and learn the theories and the frameworks and use case studies and kind of all of those great things. But putting it into practice is what you're ultimately going to do after you graduate anyway. So the thought process has always been the more we can do at Ross to prepare students for life after Ross, as sad as it is, that you have to leave. You can't stay forever. And so the more we can do in that learning environment to prepare and give students that experience, the more we want to do it. And that's why it's obviously been around and very successful for the last 30 plus years.
Welcome to Business Beyond Usual. My name is Aishwarya Dhume, and we are recording live from the Ross School of Business once again. I'm here with Vashishta, and today we're going to be talking about MAP, which are the Multi-disciplinary Action Projects that MBA students participate in annually.
Before we get started, we want to encourage you to get in touch. We always love engaging with our listeners, and we'd love to hear from you. Send us a message at bbupodcast@umich.edu, bbupodcast@umich.edu, or follow us on Instagram at ross_bbu, ross_bbu, and feel free to DM us there as well. Ask us questions, suggest episode topics, or just come by and say hello.
All right, then. So when I look back at my first year of business school, I'm FYI in my second year now, I think of a few highlights. So definitely taking core classes with my section mates. Yet again, shout out to Section 3, Michigan winning the national championship that year. Dancing at Necto events with my classmates. But, and I think Will might agree with me on this one, the one that stands out the most would be my MAP experience. And we'll talk more about why later.
MAP is a unique experience that encompasses working with the client, bonding with teammates, traveling to different cities, sometimes different countries, and it's one of the reasons why students choose to apply to Ross in the first place.
That's true. So MAP is a part of Ross's core curriculum, and there is a lot of work that goes into making it happen. So today we go behind the scenes of MAP to learn about how 100 plus projects are sourced every year, how MAP started in the first place, what role faculty members play in making MAP happen, as well as the student experience.
And to help us learn more, we've got with us Megan Anda from the Office of Action-Based Learning and Professor Krishnan to help talk about their work with MAP, as well as Will, an MBA too at Ross, to talk about his own MAP experience. But first, Megan, Professor Krishnan, Will, we'd love for you guys to introduce yourselves quickly.
Great. Well, I'm excited to be here. So Megan Anda, I'm the Managing Director of the Office of Action-Based Learning here at Ross. We facilitate MAP, like you talked about. So my whole world, especially right now, since we're a couple of weeks away from launching this year's iteration of MAP, is talking about action-based learning. I'm actually a full-time MBA 2016 alum. So I went through this myself as a student. So I can double down on everything that you said in terms of it being reasons that students come. That was true 10 years ago. So happy to be here.
I'm MS Krishnan. I'm a faculty member in the Technology and Operations Group here at the Ross Business School. I'm very passionate about teaching in MAP. I've actually taught in MAP for more than 25 years now. And it's a lot of fun even as a faculty member. In another role, I'm also the faculty director for the CK Prahlad initiative. And as part of that role, we also source MAP projects from various companies in emerging markets.
So hi everyone, my name is Will and MBA 2 here. So I just can't believe the 2 years has almost come to an end. And I cannot agree with Aishwarya more on the MAP aspect. We were in the same team, so it is definitely one of the best highlights of my MBA life here.
All right, thanks, guys. I actually didn't know MAP goes back 25 years and maybe more. So we are actually about to find out more about that. Megan, if you could get us started to help our listeners even learn what MAP is, and then how it started, like how it came to Ross, what was the motivation behind it, what's the history?
Yeah, definitely. So it has been going on for more than 25 years. So it started as a pilot program in 1991. So over 30 years now. And then we obviously have incorporated it into the curriculum since then. But it has been around over 30 years in the full-time program. And then fun fact, it actually is across most of our other degree programs here at Ross. So it's grown a lot. But what MAP is, it stands for Multi-disciplinary Action Projects. And it is a core course that MBA students take at the end of their first year. So it's kind of like a capstone where you have just been in all your core courses, you've learned all these great frameworks and theories, and now it's time to put them into practice. So you're working with real organizations on real business problems. Mm-hmm. We work with these organizations over the year to bring in those projects, what's real and relevant to them at the time, scope out projects, and then in teams of 4 to 6 students, our MBA students are working on those projects, solving them. So they have a whole suite of learning partners that support them. They have faculty advisors, they have communications advisors, they can use Ross librarians to support them. But really, it's a chance for these students to take what they've learned and really do something with it, make an impact. So both for themselves, but also for these sponsoring organizations. And like I said, it's been around for over 30 years. The motivation behind it was really to give students that real experience, right? So it's really important to sit in, to have your courses and learn the theories and the frameworks and use case studies and kind of all of those great things. But putting it into practice is what you're ultimately going to do after you graduate anyway. So the thought process has always been the more we can do at Ross to prepare students for life after Ross, as sad as it is, that you have to leave. You can't stay forever. And so the more we can do in that learning environment to prepare and give students that experience, the more we want to do it. And that's why it's obviously been around and very successful for the last 30 plus years.
Okay, I'm curious. So now that we know MAP is older than I am, how has it changed over these years? Has it been the same? I'm sure it's evolved.
Yeah, I'm sure Professor Krishnan can give some experience as well, knowing he's been directly involved in it for 25 years. But some thoughts behind it are just, well, first of all, MAP always evolves as the business landscape evolves, right? So as you can imagine, the projects that students were working on in the early 90s are certainly not the same types of topics, the same needs that the projects are covering today. So that's one of the things. And, I think the support that we give students has also evolved as we understand more of what it means to take on these very ambiguous projects that can kind of change at any moment, because that's the way the real business landscape works. We've added more support for students so that they can be successful, both in their learnings and again, for sponsors. But Professor, I'm sure you have some thoughts too, having been involved in it.
Absolutely. As Megan said, the whole idea of MAP, in some sense, I'm not bragging here, but Michigan was an innovator here in a sense that more than 30 years back, the fundamental question that actually kind of led to MAP, or a motivation behind MAP, is coming to an agreement collectively that everything in business school cannot be taught in a classroom. Especially when you're a business school and you're actually trying to create these leaders of the future, you can't assume that we can kind of discuss and make everything possible within the classroom. So that's what led to the idea of MAP. And as Megan referred to it, MAP was about the contemporary problems at that point in time that the managers are countering, right? So we kind of received that in some sense. MAP is a great window for us in terms of any business school, because we get to see right through the window in terms of what kind of problems the companies are actually tossing with right now. And that actually informs us, and it's a great opportunity for our students and even for faculty members in some sense. The two sides of MAP, right? One, as Megan referred to, is an opportunity for the students to apply what they learned in the core class in a practical context. And in the other side is also getting to know what are the current problems that the industry managers are facing, and which actually is a great learning opportunity for us as a school, as an institution as well. So going back to your question, yes, there is a big, significant in different ways in multiple dimensions. I can start with the content first, right? MAP initially was a lot about process improvement projects. It was more like an ops kind of a project for the first, few years. It was, more like how do you improve this particular process? How do you increase efficiency? And that is the, early 90s, mid 90s kind of the time, And then we gradually expanded to, go-to-market strategy projects. And then more and more what you're seeing now, as you'll see the business world is evolving, this year we have a lot of AI and generative AI related project, which is actually the current challenge that companies are facing. So that actually gives you an idea of how MAP has evolved over time in terms of its content. Now, also in terms of support system, as Megan, alluded, we've done a lot in terms of rethinking, redesigning. In fact, we had a structure initially where there'll be a set of 10, 12 advisors for all projects. They will look at all projects. And then we moved to this is important to have a specific faculty advisor, a couple of them attached to every project so that they get a lot of attention, that particular team. And it's got pros and cons, but this has worked very well for us in the last, many years. And this is one example of how we have changed in terms of a faculty standpoint and support resources, right? I mean, that again, we've done a lot of work to create this, ecosystem for the MAP teams to give them access to so many resources. And it's all, we put the team with, in this ecosystem of resources. It is all about how well they manage these resources. And that's exactly what real world business life is going to be, right? And that's what we're trying to emulate here to give them an experience. And of course, we even experimented, how do you get the reflection back from MAP to, further improve the process. And we involved students in that. So it's a continuous learning process because that's something that Ross is known for, action-based learning. And I'm sure we're increasingly getting better at that.
Just touching on what Professor has said, Megan, I was wondering if you could shed some light on how the projects are sourced. Every year, I think we get over 100 projects. I'm assuming there's a lot of preparation that goes on to it, just understanding what the students are looking for in terms of projects and looking at sponsors who are willing to offer them to the students is an intersection that needs to work out. So how does OABL work to achieve that? How long does it take? And what are some of the logistics involved? If you could just shed some light on that.
Of course, yeah. So, it's literally a full-time job in terms of we have 2 people on my team who are solely responsible for sourcing projects. And so they are developing relationships with all different types of organizations, individuals that could potentially sponsor projects, right? So we think a lot about the large corporates, but we have nonprofits that sponsor projects. We have governments sometimes. We have startups. And so there's 2 folks that really are working and are out on a day-to-day basis sourcing projects. I will say about half of our projects come from alum. So we have a great base built in because we've been doing this for 30 years, right? So at this point, almost anybody who is in the working world that has an MBA from Ross knows about MAP. And so we have this great opportunity that students in their careers come back and say, Professor Krishnan was talking about sort of these 2 frames of students and faculty, but there's the third key stakeholder in here, which are sponsors, right? And so these students come back, not students anymore. And they're like, hey, I can interact with Ross students, which is really meaningful personally, but I can also get some really great work out of a team of 4 to 6 students. So that's a lot of what we do is just build relationships with whether it's alum or people that are interested in getting support from great students. And I would say the other thing is too, so your question was how we know where to go. So some of it is just, again, naturally when it's alum, they're coming to us and they're saying we have questions about AI. We don't necessarily have to go out and say, do you have an AI project? Because that's naturally the questions that they're dealing with in the business world. So they can come to us and then we can start to say, oh yeah, that's, our students that aligns well. We ask students at the beginning as they're just coming into their first year, probably don't even remember this, but we actually do put out a survey every year to say, what are you interested in? What different types of organizations, locations? So how can we direct our efforts? Because every class is different. There's definitely some themes that we see every year, but every class might have slight nuances of a particular interest in this industry, right? And so we can tweak that. And then finally, I will say, although I have 2 amazing people on my team, we definitely don't do it alone. We have faculty. Professor Krishnan can talk to that too, but we have a number of faculty that are really great partners that have their own relationships that bring those projects in as well and, do the same sorts of things, understand what they're looking for, what the students are looking for. And that's a really important source for us too. So we look kind of across the board that anyone that has those types of connections, we welcome that.
Just a quick follow-up for both of you. MAP also has a lot of projects which are international in nature. So is there a specific set of assignments or learning outcomes that you look at when you're sourcing these projects? So for instance, there are projects where you work with micro enterprises back home in India. Those might not exactly be feasible in America because that setting doesn't exist. So when you look at international, how do you look at sourcing them and what are the learning outcomes that you see students would be able to get out of them? Any thoughts on those?
Sure. I can take that. First of all, I want to just emphasize what Megan just said. One of the big assets of Michigan and why we are able to execute MAP or action-based learning so successfully is this Office of the Action-Based Learning. We have committed resources and they do a fantastic job in terms of, running this machine. Coming back to the strength of Michigan is the ecosystem, right? Which includes our alums, which includes our executive education, which includes, our other stakeholders, right? I think that's what puts us in a unique position. And in this case, as Megan was saying, that there are a lot of faculty members who actually, build on their own connections. And whether they are advising a company or on the board of a company or doing consulting with a company or even executive programs, right? Well, that's our kind of ecosystem of industry contacts. And off late, what we've done is, last maybe 5-6 years or so, we've also kind of started bringing our executive education clients into this MAP fold, because that's kind of a win-win in multiple ways. Because first, it actually kind of strengthens the ecosystem for Michigan. Second, for the students, it actually kind of takes them to organizations that actually already is connected with Michigan. Third, it can help the faculty to better understand that particular organization if it's a kind of you're doing a project through students. So there are a lot of win-wins there. So going back to your question about emerging markets, as one of the roles I said, I'm the faculty director for the C.K. Prahalad initiative. And that initiative is in honoring late Professor C.K. Prahalad, who is a very iconic faculty member here at the Ross Business School. C.K. believed in, kind of really putting our students in the experience and deep into the emerging markets. And he always believed that we cannot teach those concepts here. They have to experience it, right? And that's what led to, again, the strength of our alums. We all got together. Alums are so passionate to do something in his honor. And that's what led to the creation of the C.K. Prahalad initiative. In fact, today, I know it's almost, we are 13 years into the initiative now. We would have done more than 64 MAP projects covering 256 students or something like that. And all these projects are in the emerging market context. A lot of them are in India because that's what the focus CK also had. And the idea there is that you cannot replicate that here, right? We want to kind of ground them, at least those students who are interested in that. And I still remember there is a team from here, 2 female students, women students from our MBA program went to India to look at women's empowerment in rural India, okay? And they came back with the experience, it's just life-transforming experience for them because they said that we really opened our eyes in terms of what does women's empowerment really mean. It means in different societies, different things, right? And it just opened up their eyes, their vision. They are still in touch with the faculty members. It was a transformative experience. So you cannot do that. And that's the whole idea of MAP, right? What you go and do in a sponsoring organization, whether it is in Europe, whether it is in Asia, whether any other country, right? You cannot replicate that. Right. So that's the whole idea here.
Which is kind of a great segue into something I was just thinking about. What are major success stories you've seen out of MAP? And you could define success stories depending on how you see it. Like what you just said, I would see as a success story, right, Professor Krishnan? Yeah. So I've heard of stories of students getting internships and eventually full-time offers. That's a type of success story. But anything like that transformative came out of MAP.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that we hear that I think is most exciting is whether or not you get a specific internship or job out of MAP, it changes the course of what you were thinking about doing. So I think that's really interesting is when we have students that end up working with an organization in an industry and they, especially when they were like, I came in and I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And now that I've worked in MAP, I'm really excited about this particular topic, right? And I think you hear that people have a chance to better understand. And that often happens with some of the international projects, but that's not exclusive, right? Of I didn't really know, much about the tech industry and now I'm in it, which again, maybe doesn't happen as much today as it used to. And maybe I'm thinking about my own experience 10, 15 years ago, some of these new areas that people were exploring and they changed that. And so I think that's something that's really meaningful. And I think the only other, we have lots of the stories, but I think one of the other things that's really transformative is the connections that students often make on their MAP teams. And there's some that you guys go off and graduate, and then all of a sudden you have this connection, and the Ross and the Michigan network is real, right? At any time, you can reach out to your classmates and say, hey, what's going on? I need help. in any sort of career thing, but we've had MAP students that have worked together in a professional capacity and brokered like large partnerships and big deals and stuff like that, which ultimately came from MAP. And so I think that's something that's really interesting, that it's sometimes there's another component to MAP of not just the project that you're working on, and the specific sponsor or client that you have. It just furthers the relationships and the network that you build in Michigan. And so that's one of the fun things about MAP too, that it's, yes, you did this project, but you have this lifelong connection now. So those are two that immediately come to mind for me.
Building on what Megan said, we can look at success in a much broader way, right? I mean, you can look at success in different stakeholders now. Let's take, for example, for students, okay? We certainly, as Megan gave examples of, you made the connection, you got the internship, and those are great success, short-term successes. But I mean, I've seen many of those. And sometimes it's also what I call is, our goal here is to create an impact. Our goal is to kind of make you think creatively. So that impact sense, I've seen one example that comes to my mind is we did a project with a government organization in India many years back, 13 years back or some 12 years back. The organization was the Unique Identification Authority of India. And the project was Aadhaar. Now you can look at your expression, okay?
That's huge.
And now I get a call from a student after 8 years after the student graduated, saying, I just can't believe we did a project on Aadhaar at that time, right? So that's a kind of an impact, right? And then this other example of the SST and women empowerment, it's just transformative experience, it's lifelong. And that's kind of a long-term success. Now, that's just a student side, right? I mean, in terms of the sponsor side, there are some examples where we have got emails from the sponsors. By the way, we just want to let you know that the Michigan team, what they recommended, we've implemented this. It is actually in the product or in the business model. And that kind of makes our day, when you get an email like that. And that's amazing. And then the third kind of a stakeholder here is the faculty members, right? I mean, even faculty members is in phenomenal stories. At least I can talk about myself and, of course, other faculty members. It can lead to, an engagement, a connection, with the network, with the industry. And that can actually often lead to you working with them on different engagements or even writing a case study and bringing it back to the classroom. There are some case studies that I've developed. Actually, it was through MAP. That's where the first initial connection started. It was a Michigan alum, who was the sponsor of the MAP. And then we started talking about, okay, fine. You do this kind of research. And we are actually facing. So the conversation kind of leads. It's up to the faculty member. You may come across these opportunities. We can look at success in multiple dimensions.
True.
Yeah.
I'll just say, too, one of the things that we just started doing to better tell that story is start an annual impact report to highlight some of those stories. I mean, it's impossible to highlight all of them, but to try and highlight some of the stories of the impact that MAP has on all of those different stakeholders. So especially as it relates to the sponsor side, I think, students don't always get to hear, right? You finish your project and you're probably off to your internship and you don't always get to hear what happens with your MAP project, but we do because we keep in touch with sponsors. And so, I mean, I have had already countless calls with sponsors that are like, the one that it just happened this past year. So one of many of your colleagues, that the sponsor was like, based on the work that was done, I got headcount approved to keep working on this, which sounds kind of silly. But in the corporate world, if you get a headcount approved to work on an initiative, that means it's meaningful and they're putting real money behind that. And that was really impressive to just hear that they were able to keep that going, right? And obviously it's a long process, so it's probably going to take 8 years for them to check in and figure out what actually happened with it. But right after the project, they got it to move forward. So we're trying to do a better job actually to continue to tell that story. We know how important that is.
Quick question, Will. I'd love to bring you in right now.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could maybe shed some light on a prospective's perspective on what MAP looks like. When you were applying to Ross, what were your thoughts on MAP and how much did it influence you to come to Ross?
So I would say, looking back on my application journey, I would say definitely MAP stands out as one of the key differentiator in deciding whether to go to Ross or, for example, to go to Darden. Absolutely, Michigan Ross stands out academically, but when I was talking with a lot of alum, when I was doing the application, they all point out MAP was a great aspect of Michigan Ross MBA program because you get to work on real life projects for the business, just as Megan and Professor just mentioned. It feels like we are creating value for the business, not only doing a student-specific project for the business. And yeah, I would say that's a huge differentiator for me to choose Ross over other schools.
I think while we are on the topic of MAP, and we've talked about how it's changed over 30 years, do we expect any changes in the coming years?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I mean, I would say there's nothing that today I can say for sure in 3 years it's going to look exactly like this. However, I can almost certainly guarantee that it's going to continue to evolve, right? Not just the topics, right? But as the work world changes, as the students change, like we will continue to evolve. I will say 30 years ago, Ross was one of the only schools that did action-based learning. And although I think we're hopefully still recognized as a leader, it's increasingly common and it's increasingly, you can probably talk to it better than I can of you see it at more and more business schools offering these types of things. So we are definitely looking at what we can continue to do within our offering to continue to ensure that it serves the students, of course, and sponsors and faculty in a meaningful way, but continue to lead. One of the things that I just mentioned that I'll still continue to point to is the impact of it. I think there's an opportunity there to continue to improve and tell that story, maybe see some of these projects through. I mean, when we have returning sponsors, there are times that we do projects year after year, but maybe there's something more there that we can do so that, these projects have a longer life. And there might be people that can see, maybe you didn't work on phase 1, but if you've worked on phase 3, you can sort of see some of it. So I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but I know for sure there's opportunities for us to evolve with everything that's going on in the world.
Thank you, Megan. Now we have one last question on this topic for Megan and Professor Krishnan. How are students assigned to projects? And for our listeners, so students rank from 100 odd projects. We especially give our top 15, I think. And then it's up to the OABL to assign us to projects. So I'm curious, what happens behind the scenes?
Yeah, so we take all of that information in and, our primary goal is always to get students on projects that they're most excited about. So we want to understand rankings. The other thing that we're continuing to gather information on is, what you're ultimately trying to get out of MAP. And so this actually has probably evolved a little bit since last year that we are asking students, what's your primary motivation? Is it to work in a new industry? Is it to work with a specific type of organization? Is it to experience a new culture, right? So what is driving you to be here to select projects? And so we take the student preferences, both your rankings and then that sort of broader question, and we look at all of the projects that you've ranked and try to get you on your top project, basically, as much as possible, right? And then from there, there's constraints that we have to look at. So there are project needs based on scope, based on the sponsor. All of the projects are teams of 4 to 6. So at a minimum, that's a constraint, but sometimes there's a reason to have a 4-person team versus a 6-person team. And so we sort of use those constraints. There's skill and language constraints that we factor in. So we sort of take the student preference first and then use the constraints that we have based on all of the information we know about the projects and build those teams.
That's helpful. On our team, there was a little rumor that sometimes OABL checks with our faculty, with our professors, before assigning us to certain projects. So maybe Professor Krishnan, if you could shed light on that.
No. First, Michigan is the best in MAP, okay? And it will remain. Okay. For faculty members, the MAP is the assignment of students is like a black box. And they just kind of, shake it, and then throw the names. No. I think there is an algorithm to it. The faculty input is minimal, but usually to the point that Megan mentioned, sometimes if the faculty source the project, the faculty may know more about the sponsor's requirements. And sometimes we may also have constraints in terms of on the ground, you're actually in some country, there are different languages spoken and English won't work. And it may be better to have at least one student who can speak the language. It helps the students, it helps the project. And so those are some of the constraints. But they are fantastic in terms of mapping the, as I said, this is the big strength of Michigan, why we've been successful. The Office of Action-Based Learning, we had, great people working there, including Megan, and they're doing a fantastic job. They map it out, taking your interest first, students' interest first, and then put all the constraints. It has worked very well so far. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Professor Krishnan. Thank you, Megan. On that note, we're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we'll be discussing the student experience.
This episode is sponsored by the Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan. Through our podcast, you can connect with the people and experiences that define the Ross way. Check out our other podcasts, such as Working for the Weekend, an exploration of the part-time MBA experience, Business and Society, a business podcast with award-winning Michigan Ross faculty, and Down to Business, a new interview series with Ross alum in the C-suite, hosted by Dean Sharon Matusik. All podcasts can be found on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
All right, we are back. So now moving on to the student experience. For context, I think Will mentioned this, but Will and I were on the same MAP team. Our client was Alaska Airlines. And we were a group of 6, and we had the best time. So to Megan's point on forming a great bond with your team, we saw that play out. So Will, we did our map together, and I'd like our listeners to just know the kind of experience we had from your point of view.
So first of all, definitely like Aishwarya said, I think we do have the best map team. Like our project was definitely one of the best from last year. So big shout outs to Aishwarya, Dia, John, Grant, and Andrew. I think just as I mentioned before, MAP was definitely one of the highlights of my MBA One Life, especially when we think about the timing of the MAP. It's just happened right before the internship starts. So I think it gave me like personally a more hands-on experience before the actual internship starts to think about how to work in a corporate culture in America, especially I would say from the international perspective. If we haven't worked here before, like it is an important opportunity for us to learn how the corporate culture functions here in the States. And I also think from another perspective, it's a great opportunity for us to connect as cohort. Like, for example, for our project, we flew out to Seattle in the first week. Then we had like social events, team dinner, and a bunch of interviews as well. It's definitely a great opportunity to connect outside of Ross. It's just one of the best experiences I have my first year. And if I were to do it again, I would still choose the same team.
I think the Alaska Airlines was your top choice, but how did you rank your MAP projects? Was there any other projects that appealed to you, or maybe some projects which your friends did and that you were a little intrigued about?
Yeah, absolutely. So like for me, that was a simple question because like I love aviation. So definitely when I see Alaska Airlines rank pops on the list, that will be my first choice. And in addition, like I flew Alaska quite often when I was in undergrad. So when I see that on the list, it fits into my skills and fits into the industry I wanted to be. So that was my top choice. And from what I heard, like a lot of people rank the projects by the corporate name if they want a big name on their experience list. And also a lot of my friends rank the projects based on the experience they had. And also as like Professor mentioned, the language spoken, because I know like a lot of projects happen outside the US. It's great to have at least one student speak the language. And I'm super glad I was able to land on my first choice. So thank you so much, OABO office.
For the benefit of our listeners, what did those 6 weeks of MAP look like? You mentioned one was flying out to Seattle. What was the purpose of that? And then what followed in the weeks after? Just like a quick summary.
Yeah, well, from my perspective, I think the first week is more like we flew into the client side to get to know the whole picture of the issue we are facing there. Because obviously we can get this knowledge by email, for example, but actually flying there, we get to talk to a lot of people, makes us getting more like knowledgeable about the whole situation happening in the corporate. After the first week, we definitely flew back to Michigan again, and we had a lot of meetings. I especially love our team, like doing the whiteboard session every Tuesday. That was definitely one of the like key points that drives the progress. And that's also, I think, very important that's also one of the crucial reasons why we had such a successful project at the end. And also, I think our team had a very open communication channel, like whether WhatsApp or like whether it's in-person meeting. Every time we face an issue, we just discuss openly in the team. Another thing I think is important is the communication with the sponsor. I remember we had weekly check-ins with sponsors to update on our progress, and also we had the midpoint presentation to make sure we are on the right track. So I think overall, that takes up the 6 weeks' time, and that's also why we had a great time working together.
Just a quick point to add on, and I think it's such a team effort, the whole MAP experience. You've got faculty assigned to different projects come and help us. So for instance, I was working on an assignment, Professor Krishnan, we reached out to him quite often for advice. He was technically not a faculty advisor, but we leaned on him quite heavily. So much so that he was there for us in a final presentation as well. So I think there's that support system that exists at Ross that was extremely valuable, and some of the ideas that we were able to bounce off from him were eventually a part of a final recommendation. So I think there is that element of that as well at Ross. It's just not the faculty advisors that you are paired up with. You can also expand beyond that.
Absolutely. And maybe Megan, you could also add to this, but there are like actually tangible skills that I took away from my MAP experience. I wasn't great at making slides and I needed that going into the summer. Story building, like some of our teammates were really, really good at it. Also like divvying up our work into work streams. These are things like that we'll carry into our work life even after we graduate. So I thought MAP was really good for that too.
Will, you mentioned this, but that's something that we hear that is one of those maybe short-term, very tangible impacts of MAP, is that it seems that our students are more prepared when they go into their internship because you've just spent the last 7 weeks essentially working in, you may not be going into a corporate office, but working on a corporate project. You're out of the classroom already. And so some of those things that you're going to need most likely in your internship, you've already had a little mini internship doing it. So yeah, MAP is a core course. So there are learning objectives to it. And there is an expectation that, you as students learn those things. And it's different than saying, hey, I'm going to learn this marketing framework or I'm going to know how to optimize inventory or something, because every project is different. However, these learning objectives are things like thinking critically, working in ambiguous situations, communicating persuasively. You're quickly talking to people that were experts on a topic, and now you might be an expert on that topic because you've just spent 6 weeks researching it 40 hours a week, and you're the one now who's presenting to these executives about something that they really care about. Working together collaboratively as a team, right? There's a lot of team-based opportunities at Ross, but this MAP is one of, if not the most intensive, because this is what you're doing all of the time. So those are the sorts of things that translate into no matter what career you're going into, what job, in the short term or near term, tend to be things that you can draw on that you've, it might not be the first time you've experienced it, but we pull those things together and, we do have expectations that students learn them.
Yeah, I think we had hands-on experience from that.
Well, my message to students, right? Just adding up, kind of building on what Megan said, technically, yes, it is a course. It is a core course. It has got the learning objectives. But the way I see it, it is beyond a course. Mm-hmm. Just imagine, it's a great opportunity as a student for you to seize because the entire ecosystem, Ross is committed to making you successful in MAP. We got these resource ecosystem, right? All designed for making sure that you do the best in your project. Faculty members as faculty advisors are committed to helping you, right? They'll kind of extend their resources, extend their network. And what better opportunity you can get as a, aspiring business leader that you get together as a team with your fellow students. You may or may not know them because you're still in first year, right? And come together and solve a problem. You're thrown into this problem, which is a real world problem. And there is a lot of support for you from Ross. The entire ecosystem is committed to making you successful. And you just imagine if you go there, succeed and hit it out of the park. It's a fantastic experience. I've seen, like you guys are saying, the MAP teams come back and, they're so happy. And just think about it that way. And it's a great opportunity.
Yeah.
And go blue.
I love the travel. I wanted to go back home. I had some good food. So Professor, Megan, and Will, what advice would you like to give students using the MAP projects?
So I think for me, it's really, there's a lot of choices. You get over 100 projects, which can be a little bit overwhelming. So I think there's the tactical of, think through how you're going to think through all 100 projects. Don't just, pick the first one. But then really the broader advice is just thinking about what these projects can do for you in the long term. You're all here for your careers and to set yourselves up for your future. And MAP is, I'm totally biased because this is what I work on all the time, but it is the best way to do that. So use that opportunity, just like Professor Krishnan said, but use that opportunity to think about what you can get out of these projects. oftentimes it's not just a name or it's not just a location. It's what you're actually doing on these projects that will be really surprising that you will 5, 10, 15 years later think about that you did this for the first time in MAP. So it requires a lot of thought to be able to sort through all of that 100 projects, but I'm pretty confident that the Ross students can do it. And so I think that's the key is remember that it's not just a new trip or a different experience anywhere, internationally, domestic, whatever, that it's really the flagship opportunity to set yourself on a new career path.
Yeah, I think, just adding to what Megan said, as a student, we have crafted this MAP experience as a part of the navigated path through Ross learning navigation that you're having. So as a student, I think you certainly have some aspiration in terms of career aspirations, where you want to be, what you want to be doing. You could look at it from that lens. You could look at it from the opportunity to learn new technologies, new concepts, new trends that are happening outside in the world, right? I mean, like, for example, we have so many projects on, marketing AI products or understanding how AI is changing, credit scoring or any of these functions. That's kind of exciting. You could actually look at from a content point of view. Sometimes it is also like, your career path and you said, wow, I've not been to that part of the world at all. I would like to, I heard so much about it. I want to experience that. That could be the case, right? Mm-hmm. And in some cases, I've seen that it kind of, there is an intersection, right? I mean, the sense about, wow, I wanted to go to this Europe and then I also wanted to do an AI project. That is the one, right? I mean, that's how you should think about it. This is a part of your learning navigation through Ross, and this is a unique opportunity that you have only at Michigan. I'll still insist a lot of other schools try to do that, but we are the best because we have invested resources in this. No other school actually let them go of all other classes. I think Michigan is the only one which will let them, students not take any other class. They are fully 100% committed to that. And a lot of our sponsors like that, In many schools, when we talk to sponsors, they say, yeah, they can show up for a week or 10 days and because they're taking other classes, right? But Michigan, it just shows us how committed we are to this. Mm-hmm. So message to students, make the best use of this.
Yeah.
I'm just going to double down real quick on what Professor Krishnan said in terms of the other schools, that's true. The breadth of what we offer here at Michigan, there aren't any other schools that do it. It's a core course. We're sending people, I don't know the numbers offhand, how many countries we send them to every year, but we're sending students all over the place, domestically and internationally. So I'll just double down on that is something that is really, even though you see it more and more at other schools, that is something that nobody is able to match us on. So
yeah.
I definitely echo what Professor and Megan just mentioned. I think at the end of all depends on what you want to get, what's your goal out of this MAP project, because everyone's preference was different. Some prefer the big name and some prefer the more hands-on experience and some like smaller corporate. And the other aspect I think is like try to see, because for me, the reason why I chose Alaska Airlines as my top choice is not only because I have passion for aviation, but I also want to try out aviation industry because I had never had experience in this sector. And I think, as Megan mentioned before, it is a great mini internship kind of opportunity for me to learn about the industry before I can make my mind where to land at a full-time job. So my overall advice is like think about your goal out of the MAP project and the kind of industry you want to go into. Then at first, the over 100 companies can seem overwhelming, but if you think clearly about your goal and the industry you are passionate about, like it can be so much easier to rank.
That's true. Like the more clarity you have, the more honesty you can put towards your choices. So for one, I'll be honest, I did want to travel. I did not want to be in Michigan, but I also wanted a project that brought me as close to the consumer as possible, which was the case for us, for our project. All right. This was a great episode. I'm so glad we kind of covered the breadth and depth of MAP in today's conversation. So thank you to all three of you for joining us in this conversation. And I hope you guys had a good time too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Business Beyond Usual is brought to you by the Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan. Today's episode was produced by myself, Aishwarya Dhume, alongside Vashishta and Mark O'Connell, the executive producers of BBU. Special thanks to our studio producers, JT Godfrey, Jonna Brockman, and Mads Henke. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, go blue, and this is Business Beyond Usual.